Hey everyone, welcome to Cuberviews, episode 35. This is your host, Ian Braverman. I hope you're having a really good day. Today I am joined by Max Richards. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
So we were talking a little bit about recording that you made a really nice meal. Tell me about it.
Oh, all right. So this one, I took a recipe like that I'd made once before using sort of a lime-focused tofu and spinach, and you get a little bit of quick pickled onion on top. And this time, I didn't have tofu to fry up, so I used some zucchini, and it made it a very different experience because the zucchini sort of liquefied a little bit and sort of turned into a mush in a good way. And I had chard instead of spinach, and that turned out really well to go with it. And I'm really interested in terms of how like texturally it turned out. One of the skills I'm working on in my cooking that I want to get better at is like planning a meal rather than just individual subsections. And so I had it with just some basic roasted potatoes that I parboiled. So you get this like little crispy thing versus a very soft, mushy thing, a little sour, vinegary versus salty, which was a nice, cool balance to have.
That sounds great. I'm sure you host some really nice cubes when you make this nice food.
Baltimore is known for its cube dinners,
Yes,
and we do love it.
absolutely. And yeah, we've met at a few events, like a couple Cube Cons. We met
Yep.
at the first Cube Con, also
Yeah, that's what
Boston Cube
we're pretty sure
Party.
that was how that happened.
I know everything kind of blurs together. I love these Cube
Yeah.
events. It's great seeing people at multiple events. It's so fun.
Yeah. I hear like from my understanding that's how old GPs used to work is you'd see the grinders and things like that. But I never did that. But this has been really nice to be like, "Oh, I met you at this other cube event. Here we are again. Let's hang out." And you can like start to build these connections where like, "All right, the first time you meet you're like, "All right, you're just saying hi, working out." And then each subsequent time you can get a little deeper, which is cool.
Yeah, the Cube networking. And you're also the host of the Salt Box, which is a
I
Cube event
did.
in
Yep.
Baltimore that was March 8th and 9th. Is that going to be happening again?
Oh, 100%. Basically, the biggest challenge for any cube event is finding a space that can do it. And I had that problem solved by it was hosted at my mom's church. And so I had a very easy, like, all right, cool, this is a good room to do it in. I was like, okay, I can do this thing. And then the other details can all be worked out. And there's a bunch of very nice people who are very helpful in helping you do all that and getting all this stuff down. But one of the things I had to do to make it my event is put in the parts of it that I want a cube event to be. I want it to be casual. It's not about winning the games, it's just about having a good time. I wanted it to be about more than just, oh, the people who are winning are the better players and the people who are losing are not as cool. So I wanted to make sure there was like an atmosphere of joy, I guess is probably the way of putting it on. So if anyone was there, I had a big yellow salt box that I got my uncle to make. And I was like, here's a big box, here are some markers, draw on my box. And people did, and it was great.
Yeah, it was great talking with you about it at Boston Cube Party. I eventually do want to run a Connecticut Cube event, and you were
Oh, yep.
definitely very helpful in answering some of my questions.
Yes. I did organize an event. I don't think of myself as a super organized person. So shout out to everyone else who was helpful in that. I finally understood. Sometimes people will have these like, oh, I want to thank these people. And every time I like, you go to an event and you hear people say, I'm like, sure, 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 whatever, whatever. I'm just here to do the thing. I felt it on stage when I was like, this would not have happened with these people and wanting to thank everyone who assisted me.
Yeah, it takes a village, definitely.
Absolutely.
And tell us about your history with Magic and Cube. Like we were talking a little bit before, your GPs with War of the Spark. And
Yep.
how did you get started with Magic?
So the first time I ever played Magic was I was in high school and one of my friends got I haven't looked back at the product exactly. It must have been like dual deck style because it was like two 40 card decks that were meant to play against each other. And that was the first time I played Magic. And we played with them and I had mine and he had his. And then I didn't play for a number of years after that. I went off, I played Hearthstone, which was sort of like the first card game I really got into. And then when I went to college, a bunch of people around me played Magic, and I made a bunch of friends doing that. So I, started to learn again. And that was around the time of Cons of Tarkir. It was around the time of Cons of Tarkir. That was my first pre-release I'd ever gone to. And then I just kept playing from there. I got really into doing online. So I played a ton. I still play Magic online, like an old man.
Magic Online's great.
It's
If you can
great.
get
I
past the UI stuff.
Yeah, once you learn that, I mean, the reason why I still do it to this day is because I prefer it to Magic Arena. It's been really good. So I played online and then I moved a couple different times and I didn't have a local store. I never had that experience growing up. I played with friends and then later on I was just online. When I moved to Baltimore, that's how I started to like branch out and start playing with other people.
That's awesome. And speaking of local game stores, if you happen to be in the area of Games IRL, Avon, Connecticut, we're always looking for more cubers. Come join us, reach out to me. And what was your favorite Hearthstone class to play?
So my favorite class is Rogue. It was definitely about just using all the cards in combination with each other. I get built like flurries of cards working together. I really loved. It was the one time I played Constructed. There was a deck called Miracle Rogue, which was is sort of a Storm equivalent.
Yep.
And the thing I really appreciated about it is it really rewarded pushing individual points of damage. And really, you got a lot of percentage equity by just getting little tiny bits of extra damage. And that was a really fun and interesting puzzle to solve.
I love Hearthstone. I haven't played it in a while.
I
I
have not played in
occasionally will
years.
open up Battlegrounds, but my favorite deck was probably Murloc Paladin. That deck was sweet.
Ooh, that deck was pretty cool.
Or
The
Reno
the
Priest. Or no, Secret Paladin.
Secret Paladin, yeah, yeah, with
Yes.
Mysterious Challenger.
Yes,
None of your
Mysterious
business.
Challenger. Yeah. You just get like five secrets that did nothing, and it was so fun.
Yeah, they all did like you would draw them and you're like, these kind of suck, and then you'd play this big thing and the Christmas tree would light up with all the secrets, and it
Yep.
was just like, oh, this is like impossible to answer.
Yes. And what are some of your hobbies outside of Magic and Cube?
So unsurprisingly, since I started about cooking, I really enjoy doing cooking, which is great because apparently there's a strong crossover in the Baltimore Cube and Baltimore interest in cooking scene. That's definitely probably the thing I do the most that's not Magic because I spend a lot of time playing Magic.
And when did you start playing Cube?
I started playing Cube when they put it on Magic Online. I watched some LSV Vintage Cube videos when they were on Channel Fireball, and then I started playing Cube on Magic Online, and they would have Vintage Cube, and I was really excited, and I played those. And then they would actually host other cubes. They don't do that anymore, but they used to have other cubes that weren't Vintage Cube on, and I really enjoyed doing that. I had already decided Cube was my favorite format, and I didn't play in paper. I was like, yeah, this is great. When I moved to Baltimore, I went to a local game store. The one we play at now was not open yet. So I was at a different one and I met Anthony. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he had a podcast. And I talked to him like, yeah, my favorite format is Cube. Do you know what Cube is? Like, have you heard of this? Didn't know him at this point, talking to a person who I don't know how many episodes he'd recorded, but some number at that point probably, which is very funny.
Yes. It's amazing how many people LSV probably got into Cube. So many people have that story of either
Yeah.
Newmod or LSV or these Magic Online vintage Cube streamers that just
Yeah.
got so many people in the Cube.
You used to be able to watch John Finkel play Vintage Cube, and he would draft Storm every time. He never drafted anything other than Storm, but it was so much fun to watch. Just like all of the little bits and pieces, because they all look slightly different. It's all Storm, but there's lots of slightly different ways that it was done.
Back when Storm was hard mode and not just Underworld Breach plus
Yeah, exactly.
LED. Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, we've got these three cards. It was you're working all these different pieces together. I keep all of my pictures of deck lists from all of my drafts. One of my favorite lists I've ever had was a Storm deck with Monastery Swiftspear as the win condition. That was
Wow.
hard mode.
Wow.
That deck got a trophy.
Wow. And today's cube that we're talking about, I would say, is the opposite of Storm.
Yep.
Today, we're talking about the virtually French cube, which is a cube that is very focused on cards that affect the board, almost all French vanilla creatures. Tell us what it means for a creature to be French vanilla compared to vanilla.
So there's sort of the steps up. You got basic vanilla. It's a creature with power and toughness. Okay, you can layer on top of that French vanilla, which is a creature with basic keywords flying, trample, lifelink, some kind of keyword that is in the game evergreen and is going to be across many cards. Sometimes they include reminder text, especially if you look at like core sets. There's also in a sort of side grade, there's the virtually vanilla. So Man of War is a virtually vanilla card because it comes in, it does a thing, in this case, bounces a creature. But once it's in play, it's just a vanilla creature, it's just a 2/2. So then combining those together is how we get our virtually French. So it might have keywords, it might have an ETB, but most of the time it comes in and is a creature with some basic power and toughness and maybe some words. but it's not going to do a lot of modifying itself.
For most of its life cycle, it's French and vanilla.
Most of, yeah.
And what was the inspiration behind this cube? It's interesting hearing you talk about cube that it sounds like a lot of your cube is Magic Online doing like vintage cube, which is pretty
Hmm.
complex gameplay. What made you inspired to build a cube that's mostly based around simpler game mechanics and vanilla creatures?
So one of the things I did learn is after my foray into Vintage Cube is I actually really enjoyed lower powered environments a lot more. I generally play a lot of limited, and so things that are very similar in that same space are my bread and butter. Those are the ones I really enjoy. Incidentally, I also do the best in them, but I also enjoy them the most. But it actually started with the very first cube I made. So this is the second cube I've made. The very first cube I made, it had this rule stipulation of like every creature had could be fetched by either Imperial Recruiter or Recruiter of the Guard,
Oh,
which was interesting, but due to the things I enjoy in Magic being kind of complicated, and I love weird rules interactions and cards moving around, it was one of the most complicated cubes I've ever seen. Boards got larger and larger over time very quickly. You couldn't really attack very well because everything was pretty small. It was very easy for creatures to just randomly trade off. And so it was all about building these different engines, which I do think is kind of a cool concept. But the board was really complicated. There would be multiple activated abilities. It was unsure where to go. And so this was made in contrast to that. I have this now very complicated environment, and I'm like, let me go completely opposite direction. I think I've gone too far, so let me just pare it down as simple as possible. What is the basic core ideas of magic? And so this was directly made in response to going too far off in the complicated. Let me push all the way into the simple. And then what do I mean by simple?
yeah, that's really cool. I think it's so interesting when cube designers, like I've done this before also, have a cube that's full one side of the spectrum, like really intense, like really complicated, like you were saying, and then almost as an exercise for yourself, build something that's the other total opposite side. Like, for example, I have my Bant cube, which is
Mm-hmm.
only Bant cards. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to try a Rakdos cube that's just complete 180.
Everything
And
that can't fit in the bad cube. Here it is. Here you go.
yeah, and it's a great learning lesson. It really taught me so much about what I could do on the other side of the spectrum. And it felt like it really helped me with my cube design. I think that's a really cool story. And I feel like there's a lot of different audiences that a lower word count cube like this could be for. Like, for example, when people at the end of the night have already done one cube and they're like, I don't think I want to do another. But then you're like, oh, but I have this cube that's pretty low power, no complexity. You barely have to read. And then people might stick around for another. That's great. Or, of course, newer players, people who maybe don't have the complexity budget to be able to read a million different cards without getting overwhelmed. So, something like this that, like we're going to talk about later, also has some duplicates, lower word count could be great. And then also just there are some people in my play group who just hate reading cards. I and
That's
I
very true. I can
there are
feel that.
definitely nights where I'm like, I don't want to read cards. I'm tired. It's been a day after work.
Yeah, this was definitely designed with newer players in mind, both in terms of designed as in these are cards I think can be teaching tools or inspirations for newer players. One of the mechanics I adore, and Parker, I know Parker also does this, is Raid, because it is so good at teaching you to play your creatures post combat.
Yes, I totally agree. And there's another player in my play group. He was on episode 1 of Cuberviews, Sam Cote. He also has his TLDR cube, which
Hmm.
every card has to be 5 lines of text or less. This cube reminds me a lot of that cube, but in some ways, it's really even more intense than his. Like for him, he kind of does kind of funny things where he's like, all right, this has 5 lines of text, but it's the cryptic command in like one special printing where everything's like bunched up.
Technically meets the restriction.
So I think this cube is like a cool, even further down the spectrum of that cube.
Yeah. One of the things that I found extremely helpful in designing this cube is I had my friend Charlotte, who lived just around the corner from me and was very new to Magic. I had her over, we had dinner, and then I brought her and was like, here are cards. Tell me what you think about them. In just very open-ended, do you like them? Do you hate it? Do you want to read them? Do you be like, this is too much? Because as an experienced player, it's really hard to go back and think what is simple? What is the basic idea? Because I have this big well of past experiences. So a card, I'm like, oh, I know what this does because it's similar to all of these other things. I can understand it. Might still be read as unapproachable.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think that players, you and me, we've been playing for years and years. When we think, oh, I want to build a cube that's for newer players or less complex, we have a different opinion, like you're saying, on what less complex means. And I think sometimes we underestimate newer players a little bit. Like
Yep.
when we put like a 1 mana 1/1 that's like literally has no words on it, we're like, this is perfect for new players. They won't have to read. And but
Yep.
then at the same time, new players want to see interesting cards too. So it's an interesting dichotomy.
I think I was definitely very guilty of that at various points of dumbing it down too far. And I think finding that right level is challenging. I think Foundations was a really helpful look at that. I remember listening to Carmen talk about it and talking about how to properly have the actual complexity be slightly different than it was expected because you still want there to be an exciting part. Because if it's just all grizzly bears and shocks, it might not actually draw anyone in.
Yeah. And then we have on the other side of the spectrum, 100 ornithopters, which is all 0/2s. So it doesn't sound that interesting, but it is a lot more intense than you think.
Is very difficult. Accu is very easy to draft in such a way that you cannot win the game.
Yes. And I'm curious to hear about how the archetypes and themes were built into this cube when it's so focused on a mechanical purpose of having a low complexity at its core. Like, I do see archetypes when I'm looking at the cube list, like equipment, make your vanilla creatures have some abilities, or a lot of cards having to play off some artifact synergies too, or 1/1 counters, buffing creatures, some tokens. When building a cube that's so focused on combat, did you build this cube with archetypes in mind, or was it more about the general theme and the overall structure you were going for of French vanilla and then building around that?
So, one of the things I, as a player, and therefore it sort of informs my design, really enjoy is non-prescriptive archetypes. I am endlessly fascinated between the synergy between Moat Piranhas and Windrake, 2 mana 3/3 defender, and a flying creature. Those two have some synergy to each other, which is you've got this overstated defender to gum up the ground, and then the flyer to win over it. There's no explicit reference between the two cards that tells you there's a synergy here, but there is a relationship between them. And that is the exact kind of thing I find fascinating. So
That's
when I was building out the cube, that's the kind of idea that informs what cards I'm including. It informs me not putting in as many cards that are trying to call out explicit pieces. Oh, you're looking for all the goblins. Here's the goblin payoff. You're looking for all the artifacts. Here's the artifact payoff. I have some of that in there because it can make it nice. I'm trying to make it more open-ended.
yeah, that's really interesting because this cube being so, as described, French vanilla, having French vanilla creatures, by default is going to come down to the more basic gameplay of magic, combat,
Hmm.
instants, sorceries, and finding ways to use those and the more basic synergies. So that's really interesting to hear a 3 mana 3/3 defender and a 2/2 flyer. Yeah, I mean, they don't have any inherent like synergy together, but the 3/3, like you said, can block and then the 2/2 can attack. And rather than being more of like a synergy, it feels more like a strategy.
That's probably a good way of saying it. It's more about these all fit within the same strategy. One of the things that did lead to equipment being a payoff is, okay, I've got these cards, these creatures that have keywords. What am I doing with them? I can attack with them, but one of the best ways is if you enhance them, you get this sort of added bonus. Because if you give it +1/+1, well, now that also +1/+1 also has either flying or first strike or something. And so you get this additional bonus from equipment just because I'm already playing cards with lots of keywords. So you can really easily get a nice bonus to them.
Yeah, that's really cool. And another big thing about this cube is combat tricks. Combat tricks are so fun. They're a really cool part
So
of
good.
limited. But in my experience, a lot of cubes, it can be really hard to pull them off. And honestly, even in like regular limited,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not a limited format that combat tricks are good when there's a lot of instant speed removal or the interaction's really strong or combat's not as important. What are some of the steps that you've taken to make combat tricks be good in this cube? Like, have you tried to lessen the amount of instant speed removal? Like, I was looking at the list and there are some instant speed removal pieces, but not a ton. And it really does look like you've purposefully lowered them.
Yeah, that was definitely a very intentional choice about removing instant speed removal because combat tricks are sick. They're so good. They're like probably one of the coolest parts about basic Magic interaction is the dance of combat tricks and creatures attacking each other and bluffing a trick is really nice. Also, I think it's a level one strategy that I think is very interesting and can be a good way to level up your own game. You can play the same deck with these combat tricks, and as you gain an experience, you begin to play the deck better and better, and it really rewards you having knowledge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we already talked about it with creatures with raid. Raid is great because it teaches players to play spells after combat. And
Yep.
I can't tell you the amount of times that I've taught somebody magic and I've explained what instants do that you can play them anytime. New players, sometimes that can be difficult to understand, like especially if they've come from something like Hearthstone or other board games that you do
Yep.
things on your own turn and you have certain times that you can do the things. And combat tricks are perfect for teaching new players about instant speed. You can do them on your main phase, but then you're missing out on all the benefits of them.
Yeah, they get so much value by giving specific timing. They block, and now you've got your giant growth, and you got them, and you feel so good for having got them. When I play, if the giant growth is phased up, I'm blocking anyway. I want to trade with the giant growth, but you feel so good as a new player. You feel like you got them, even if strategically it's pretty even trade.
Have you noticed that there are any differences in combat in this cube compared to other cubes that you've played because of having combat tricks? Like, have you noticed that people block differently or attack differently because they know that combat tricks are a part of this cube compared to other cubes where, sure, there's like instant speed removal. So double blocking can be dangerous in this cube. But most cubes, like Vintage Cube, for example, when you
Mhm.
attack and they have another creature, they're not going to have a giant growth.
Yeah, there's no way. Combat tricks would be way too bad. I've noticed a little bit. It's challenging because one of the awkward parts about something like this is combat tricks and equipment fight for the same space. You often will have a deck that has more equipment and maybe not as many combat tricks. And so trying to find the balance between them has been very difficult. So if someone has equipment, they'll have to use their mana up front to equip the creature, and then they might not have it for the combat trick, and therefore it's easier to block. But I do think people block slightly differently when you just attack with some open mana. I'm not sure, to be honest. I really don't know. I still play mostly the same, and I just say if you have a combat trick, it's fine. I'll just trade with your combat trick instead of with your creature, and hopefully it'll be fine.
I so often I'm like, I'm not blocking. They probably have a combat trick.
Actually, now that you're saying that, I did have it last night. We played this cube, and I did get a lot of. I was just attack with my creatures, and I just got free damage because they just didn't block. And I'm like, okay, I'll just play another creature instead. This is fine.
I do that so often, especially in like sealed. They'll have like a 3/3 and I'll have a 1/1 and I'm like, I'm not gonna block with this 1/1 anyway. So I'll attack and then you see like the lights go off in their head and they're like, I'm not gonna block. And you hear them always like they have that tone of voice like no blocks or
Yeah.
block.
And in your head, you're just pump fisting. Yeah, I got free damage. Look at that.
And then they do block and you're like, why would you block? Are you stupid? What if I had something? And what are some of your favorite combat tricks in the cube? Like, there's some that I definitely have some nostalgia looking at the list for, like especially Subtle Strike from Kaladesh. I love
Subtle
that
Strike is
card.
so sick. I love that card
Yeah.
so much.
It can be like a 3-for-1 in some situations. I feel like it's really unique in that way because it puts a counter on one of your creatures. So you can win one combat. It shrinks another one of their creatures. So you can win another block and you can walk away with a 1/1 counter. That card's awesome.
That card is very cool. I think probably my favorite combat trick. This one's very strong and actually has a constructed pedigree. Makes it stronger in the queue, but Gore Clan Rampager, that's so good. It's
Oh,
so big and it gives it trample, so you're getting all that damage in.
that's a Peasant Cube All Star.
That card is really strong.
Yeah. And we already mentioned it a little bit, but another type of card that I love to play in lower power cubes is equipments.
Mhm.
In a cube where you have the time to build up and you're not dying like crazy fast, and it's a lot about combat and it can be a little bit slower gameplay, equipment are kind of like drawing a card every turn because you can repeatedly equip it to your creature. And let's say you late game draw a 1/1. Normally that's terrible because you have your equipment that maybe gives +2/+2 or +3/+3. Any creature you draw is always going to be better, especially in like chaos draft or limited or lower power. I think that they're really sweet.
Yeah, equipment have being able to just re-equip multiple times feels so good. It feels like you're grinding out all this extra value because, oh, now it's as if my whole team is getting +2/+2 because every time I get a new creature, I just move it over.
Yeah, absolutely. And but in this cube, it's interesting because it feels like there aren't the extremely powerful equipment that you see in many lists. For example, there is no batter skull or the swords that have these huge effects. Mostly these equipments are just like stat buffs, like Gold Vein Pick that gets +1/+1 to the creature, and when you deal damage to them, you make a treasure. It feels like a lot of the combat tricks and equipment in this cube, for the most part, add more evergreen abilities to creatures, like it buffs their stats, or it gives them a keyword like First Strike or Menace. Is that a purposeful thing that you didn't want to give combat tricks that give a more complicated ability or an equipment that gives the creature 10 extra lines of text? Would that defeat the purpose of the cube?
I think it would. One of my least favorite cards of all time is the card Eater of Virtue, which is the Bone Splitter, but with so many more words that so often don't matter.
I think that the extra words are a downside usually. It's like, wait, the creature exiles? What?
Yeah. So I definitely am intending on making it so that the creatures are still understandable. You can still get them because, yeah, there's a representation in that, oh, there's a piece of equipment on it too. I can look down and see that the creature has been modified, but I don't want to break too hard the rule of being able to look at a creature and be like, okay, I know I can understand what it's doing. But for me, it also comes a lot from what cards were good and limited, because that's a very big informing of what cards are actually good enough to be played.
Does this cube feel like limited? Or have you had experiences with playing this cube where you really say, wow, this feels like I'm playing draft or sealed or something? Or are there parts of this cube that make it stand away from limited?
When I play this cube, I usually will end up in a good version of a limited deck. It's still almost always at least some kind of mid-rangey. It probably draws the biggest inspiration from core sets in that you don't end up with these super divergent synergistic decks. It's still mostly just based off of cards interacting with each other. I think probably the closest parallel is limited as opposed to any other constructed format or even other cubes, honestly. It's definitely somewhere between your average, maybe like peasanty, paupery cube, and a limited deck.
Yeah, that's really cool. What about this cubes and the decks that it produces makes it feel like a limited deck? Is it the combat tricks and the equipment and the less instant speed removal and the combat focus that makes it feel like a limited deck? Like, what about a lower power cube makes it feel like limited?
I think for me, the notion that it makes it feel like limited is down to the combat step, how important the combat step is. As you go higher and higher power, you are much more likely to interact with creatures with removal spells. And so it ends up being a game of they play a creature, you play a removal spell, you play a creature, they play a removal spell, as opposed to there's a lot of creatures hitting each other and trading, which is an experience that doesn't happen as much. The one thing that encourages things that will change that interaction, where equipment and combat tricks change the interaction between that two creatures have with each other in a way that doesn't appear in a higher powered format because the combat step is so integral to the draft experience.
Yeah. And does this cube have aggro decks or does it have control decks or combo? Or is it, like you mentioned, mostly mid range?
So in its very first iteration, it was definitely too heavy control focused.
Oh,
I tend to be a control player, and so I put cards I liked in, which turned it a little slow and a little grindy. I'm very happy with the steps I made relatively recently, just before the salt box actually, that really toned up the level of aggression. Because I think there are real aggro decks now, and there are real control decks. including my beloved Cruel Ultimatum,
Oh
which
yeah.
is that card is so good. It's such a dream. It's just a single card. You only need it, and it just provides such a single dream. You're like, okay, this is my plan.
I was playing a retro vintage cube a couple weeks ago, and
Hmm.
in that cube, I went Grixis Control, and my finisher was Cruel Ultimatum, and the deck was not good, but it was just so sick, like playing with like power and the most powerful cards in Magic, and then my win con being Cruel
And
Ultimatum.
you're just like, all right, here we go.
And then like people during the draft would be like, "What are you playing? Dream Halls to cheat into play or something?" And I was like, "Nope."
I am tapping 7 lands or maybe 5 lands, a Mox, and like a Signet.
Yep. And this cube has actually pretty good fixing. 66 lands out of a 360 card list. So over 18% fixing. And it also, like we were just mentioning, it has Cruel Ultimatum, 3 color cards, cards with intense pip requirements. What do the decks look like in this cube? Are they often 2 color, 1 color, or does the higher amount of fixing and the way the cube is constructed have people build 3 color decks often? I could see myself in a cube like this, and I generally do this pretty often with lower power cubes, going for a more mid range, slower deck. And often the best decks like that are 5 color for me. Like being able to
Yep.
just splash into a bunch of really powerful cards, like a Cruel Ultimatum. I mean, if the game's going to go to 10 turns, why not? I'll double splash, double blue or something.
Nothing will beat you at the top end if you're casting Cruel Ultimatum. There's nothing else that's gonna beat it out.
Yeah.
I think it is so easy and so common for the proper thing to do at a low power cube is to take removal, take card draw, take fixing, and just try to do that and take whatever cards of whatever color fit those descriptions. It's definitely been a challenge, an intentional challenge with myself. How do I prevent players from just doing that? And I think I've done a pretty good job. I think the way I am imagining that it plays out is that you don't get to do that because you have to pay respects to aggressive decks, which means you can't just play tap land, tap land, tap land, 4 mana Solemn Simulacrum or something,
My
and
favorite kind
then
of magic.
yeah. I also love that kind of magic sometimes, but I think it's much more interesting to have aggro versus control than a control mirror usually. From the control player side, the feeling of, all right, I've got to like do everything I can to survive to like build this turning the corner moment and this big change in where I can take over the game is a really rewarding experience. And from the aggro side of, okay, I have this game plan I need to enact. I'm on the front foot. I need to put my foot on the gas and keep going and going. Because if this game goes on, I will lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting because I had on episode 26 Max Mayer on.
Mm.
And on that episode, we were
Shout
talking
out
about
other
Chaos
maxes.
Draft. Yeah, another one of the Maxes. And we were talking about Chaos Draft and the comparisons between Cube and Chaos Draft. And so it's really interesting hearing you say that in a lower power cube, sometimes you default and other people default to taking fixing, taking bombs, taking removal. And that's so similar to what we were talking about with Chaos Draft, where I could totally see a cube like this feeling like Chaos Draft in some ways.
Yeah. As I stated early on, the level of fixing, and I descend from the Baltimore style of cube theory, which includes lots of fixing in our cubes, just so that everyone will always get a little something, because no one wants to lose from drawing all forests and no mountains. It's just kind of sucks.
All forests and
So,
Cruel Ultimatum.
yeah. Well, that's on you for putting too many forests and a cruel ultimatum in your deck. That one you can get punished on. Definitely the level of fixing is an inspiration from that. As a designer, I just have to lock that in because so much of me wants to just I can just cut one or two, fit a couple more cards I like in. So I have to like hard lock them in myself to be like, no, no, I'm not allowed to do that. This is a requirement of getting in. I am not allowed to shave a land, essentially. The same idea that wants you to shave a land from your limited deck.
Go 13 lands.
Yeah, exactly. You end up on 13 lands.
Yep. And I wanted to ask you about in a lower power cube like this that's focused on low complexity and combat, what have been some of the most powerful decks and archetypes you've seen drafted in the cube? Like, I can imagine in a cube that's being so combat focused and with so many creatures that are more vanilla that going wide, for example, could be really strong. Like looking at the list, one card that stood out to me was Overrun. Just plain and simple, 5 mana sorcery, green, green, green. All creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample. I mean, if your opponents have a bunch of French vanilla creatures and they're holding up combat tricks and you have three 1/1s and then you play an
Hmm.
overrun, they're out of luck.
I have been so surprised that Overrun hasn't just demolished everything.
Oh,
It has been completely fine. I assumed when I put it in that it'd be one of the better cards in the cube, and people take it as if it's that, and it performs fine, which has been very interesting. I would have to really look at the decks people are putting it in just to examine why. For a long time, the easiest, best card in the cube was Broodmate Dragon, and it's definitely still up there in terms of this card is really good. It's gone down as you actually have to play against aggro decks is more real. The value of this dragon is a big card that is two creatures has gone down slightly. I still think the quote unquote rares are the best cards. You end up with things like Siege Rhino, Broodmate Dragon, Cruel Ultimatum, Kranko, although Kranko got cut recently, which is very sad for me. If it's a card you recognize from other cubes, it's probably really good here.
yep. I sometimes do that when I play lower power cubes where I'll be seeing all these like commons and uncommons that I've never seen before, but then in the pack I'll see like a Gravedigger and be like, well, I know what that card does and I know it's good. So
Yep.
slam. Hey, Mole Drifter, boom. Deck's done.
Yep. There's a reason why Mole Drifter is not in here.
Yep. And tell me about what the opinions and comments you've gotten from drafters who are more experienced Magic players playing this cube. Have they said, oh, this cube's boring? Have they also enjoyed the cube as much as newer players?
I've been happy that other experienced players have drafted it and enjoyed the gameplay. I had a lot of people come up to me at the Saltbox and say they drafted it and they had a great time, which was, as a designer, just the best thing to hear, is that people had a good time and enjoyed drafting it. Because I think there is this weird thing when you design for newer players that you're like, oh, well, the experienced players aren't going to like it. But there is actual subtlety and some interesting things to learn here even if the cards themselves are not as explicit about them, each card itself being a simpler piece, the interaction space is still quite large. I've been happy to hear that other like more experienced players are enjoying the cube and finding out what do they think is actually good, what do they think is not as good, which is useful in metric, but not necessarily the most important one.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I love lower power cubes. And for me, vintage cube, that's the more complex gameplay. And newer players, when they see vintage cube, they say, oh, this is so complex. All these cards do so many things and they're so
Hmm.
complicated. But then at the same time, vintage cube often just boils down to like, can I get my two interactions and can you stop me? I'm going to tinker
Yeah.
Blightsteel. Do you have the interaction? No.
It's not actually about learning all the complexity of interaction. It's about learning, okay, these cards fit together well. And that has been a puzzle that has been solved by usually it's either, oh, I'm watching a video and oh, they tell me how to do this, or my opponent did this, and now I can now understand, oh, you put these cards together and they worked well. Whereas if you're playing a bunch of cards you're unfamiliar with, trying to figure out the network is a lot harder because you don't have the fallback of, oh, okay, I know this card, I know this card, and I know they work well together, and I can put them in the same space.
Compared to like a lower power cube, I feel like where it's almost more interesting to me as a more longtime player because you have to inch out those little advantages. So when do I play the combat trick? When do I hold up the interaction? Can I tap out here? It really feels like that's almost more rewarding advanced gameplay in some ways than, well, I played this thing and they had the force of will anyway, or
Yep.
the free spell that I couldn't have planned for, or I was on the draw and they had turn two channel. What was I going to do about that?
Yeah, I think definitely the challenge that ends up happening is there are no win buttons. You can't accidentally stumble into a win because you drew your best cards or whatever. Maybe you'll have an advantage because your cards are better than their opponents, but no one card is going to solo a game usually.
Yeah, you have to put together all these cards and time them correctly. I think that it's interesting how when sometimes as a cube curator, we build a cube for a newer player, and then it's actually the cubes that more advanced players are most excited by. And tell me about your favorite decks that you've seen in the cube.
All right. My favorite deck in this cube is Whirler Maker Control.
Wow, that brings me back. Whirler
Yeah,
Mech.
see, all right, you understand it because you played Kaladesh, right? You played
Yep.
Kaladesh Limited.
That
Yeah,
card was, oh my God.
it was certifiably okay in that format.
Hey, it's Retrofitter Foundry before its time.
I have so many people who are experienced players draft this cube and then come up to me after him to be, and with Whirlmaker in hand to be like, why is this in here? And it's because I love that card so much. That card is never leaving my cube. Even if it's only for me, every time I can do it, I will just always get the Whirlmaker if I want. So I do at least command the idea of is the only big mana sink to create a creature in the cube. If your opponent has a bunch of removal spells, it's the best card in the cube.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
So that is my favorite card in the cube. It is my favorite deck. The other one that I have a big fondness for is the green red sort of combat tricks deck. You just play all of the really good combat tricks and just whatever 2 mana creatures that can have an advantage, maybe some 3 mana creatures, and you just start attacking. You just start swinging.
Math is for blockers.
Yeah. Oh, and it's very simple math because they're like, all right, block, I dare you. I've got something, I'm sure.
Yeah, totally. And this cube does not have any board wipes. Tell me about
Nope.
that.
I'm a notorious Wrath hater. So, from a design perspective, let's start there. Let's start in the proper answer, which is board wipes have such a strong impact on a game that it is completely format defining. It means you need to play differently with the knowledge of board wipes' existence. You need to like plan out, okay, I should not pull all of my creatures out, which is a rather complicated advantage, like to try to figure out. It's a very complicated interaction. And so it punishes newer players way harder than it punishes experienced players. On the flip side, I have seen a lot of newer players put wraths in decks that board wipes are not great at. You've got all these creatures, and then you put a board wipe in because you hear board wipes are good, and it's fine, but it's not at its best. So that's primarily what it is because board wipes discourage, I think, what is the conceit of the game. I think it breaks one of the ideas of this is what we're focusing on. We're focusing on our creatures interacting with each other, and it breaks that parity too hard. As a personal note, as a board wipe hater, I think they're just not very fun. I think they fit in certain environments, and I think the gameplay is fine in some places, but in a lower powered one, it just feels so wrong to me. Just purely on vibes.
Speaking of teaching new players, I would say one of the most brutal moments when you're teaching a new player, and like I almost cringe a little bit whenever it happens, is when a new player has no cards in hand, they've played all their creatures, and then the opponent plays a ward wipe, and then the player goes, "What was that? I played everything right. I had all my stuff in play." And
Yep.
then the experienced player's response is, "Well, you shouldn't have overextended." And it's like, oh, I just cringe a little bit.
It's like so much every other part of the game is telling you to push your advantage.
Yeah.
And let's be real, there is interesting gameplay in that back and forth. I just think it's not for this space. I think it's less interesting here.
I could totally see that. So, Max, tell me about this optional rule that you also have that you can start at 25 life if you speak in a French accent. And if you drop the French accent, you lose 5 extra life immediately.
So when I had the idea of this idea of like, oh, it's gonna be a French vanilla cube, I was working on it, and then I just had this idea that all the cards were French show up in my head. And then of course I started doing a funny French accent. If you look at the Cube Cobra link, it's a Cube Cobra slash ho ho ho.
Oh,
So I thought it was really funny. It has never been done. I meant to do it last night. I meant to mention it and ask people to do it because I thought it would be really funny, but I didn't. I didn't remember to do that. So it so far hasn't been done. There's also the caveat of we have my friend Julian in our local cube group, and he is French. So I had to add the extension of listen. He's a Pro Tour player. He doesn't need the help, so he has to do an American accent.
wow. Has he done the American accent?
I don't know. I've never heard his American accent before. But hopefully, one day I'll get him to draft and then I'll lock in this rule is happening.
This is hilarious. You got to put it on the box so you remember.
Yeah, exactly.
Give people like those little cards like Zach Burch with the Cascade Cube with like
The
reminder,
reminder card.
but it's
Reminder,
just
you can
speak in
speak
French.
French.
That's awesome. Let's jump into a pack one, pick one here. I'll read off the pack. I'm excited to read this because some pack one, pick ones I have to read for like 10 minutes, but all these cards have so much less words. It's great.
There you go.
We have Reeve Soul, which is 1 and a black sorcery, destroy target creature power 3 or less. Spire Patrol, 2 white blue, flying 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls, That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Waterfront District, blue-black tap land that you can also pay for and sack to draw a card. And then we have Silver Quill Campus, black-white tap land that you can pay for and scry one. Those two are kind of similar, but slightly different.
Very much in the same space.
Then we have Twisted Landscape, which is a colorless land with cycling for black, red, green. And then you can also sack it to fetch for a basic swamp, mountain, or forest. Then we have Rushing Tide Zubera. That's so funny, the Zubera. Are there other Zuberas in the list?
There are no other Zuberas. This is not one of the Zuberas that cares about Zuberas dying. It is at least its own interesting card, but also the fact that it's a Zubera is very funny to me.
Yes. This thing looks like it, like an alien from Aliens or something. Like this thing is.
It looks like he's melted out and is trying to claw out from whatever weird circle he's being drowned in.
Yeah, that art is metal. It's 2 blue for a 3/3. And when it is put into a graveyard from play, if 4 more damage was dealt to it, you draw 3 cards. I mean, how do you lose when you draw 3 cards? It's pretty good.
You can jump block with it. You can jump block a 4/4 and still feel like you're ahead.
And then we have Awaken the Ancient, which is 1 red enchantment aura. Enchanted Mountain is a 7/7 red giant with haste. So it's so funny that it gives it haste. So is the idea that you play a mountain and then you lay this on that same mountain and then attack with it?
It definitely happened, I think, after Koth, which is the planeswalker that turned mountains into 4/4s. They
Oh,
started giving everything that makes a land a creature haste because there was such awkwardness about if you play Koth and then you plus technically targeting the mountain you play as your fourth land, it can't attack, but it's functionally equivalent as if you just picked a different mountain. But in paper, it's like, oh, that's the land you played. And it's just such a gotcha kind of a thing, which is why
yeah.
they all give haste now.
You should have targeted your other mountain, idiot.
Yeah, right?
And then we have Essence Scatter, which is 1 and a blue, counter target creature spell. Great card.
Classic.
Soothsayer Adept, 1 and a blue, 1/3. You can pay 1 and a blue and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. Why is this not Merfolk Looter? Was Merfolk Looter too good?
I think Merfolk Glitter is a little too strong. I'm not sure that it's actually fully too strong. I think it encourages a lot of decision making that is somewhere between interesting and too much.
Ah.
Having access to that much looting makes sculpting your hand quite difficult because you have such a stronger control over it, which is at least the reason I tell myself as to why it's not Merfolk Looter.
I think that it actually does kind of have more interesting gameplay because Merfolk Looter, you just tap it every turn
Yeah,
because why
yeah.
not? Compared to this, we have to make a conscious decision to leave up the mana, and well, maybe you're
And it's
actually
a real
holding up
creature.
Essence Scatter instead.
Yeah.
And then we have Jungle Creeper, which is 1 black green, 3/3, and you can pay 5 and return it from your graveyard to your hand. I'm not sure if it's still in Jamie's 15 card Highlander cube that we spoke on a previous episode, but this card is great. I like this card from is
This
this
card's sick.
Rivals? This card's awesome.
Yeah.
We've Into the Maw of Hell, which is 4 red sorcery. Destroy target land and it deals 13 at target creature. Boom. Now that's some
Banger.
land destruction right there. I like that card.
It's so funny because the destroy target land mode is almost to me a downside. It's just weird for it to be there, but I'm like, okay. But Into the Maw of Hell, a card that's named Into the Maw of Hell that deals 13 damage is so sick.
Yeah, and I've said it a few times with cards on this cube, but that art is sick. Look at that.
Yeah.
It's like a guy on a horse coming out of hell. That card's awesome. Then we have Putrefy, which is 1 black green, destroy target artifact or creature, can't be regenerated. Classic. And then we have Gravedigger, which I've never seen this Gravedigger art. This one's nuts. It's 3 and a black. I think, is this from Portal or what is this from?
That's what that set symbol is.
Oh, wow. When Gravedigger comes into play, return a summon creature from your discard pile to your hand. None of those words make sense in 2025 Magic.
Nope. I will say I do not curate my art on Cube Cobra. It's just whatever happens to go in. So I don't know the logic. I guess it gives me the Portal version of Gravedigger.
I just like how none of this card makes sense anymore. Like it has like the shield and the sword next to the power and
Yep.
toughness.
Portal was such a weird set.
Yeah. And this Gravedigger is probably way too expensive for no reason. And
Probably.
then we have Cancel, 1 blue, counter target spell. There we go. And finally, Colossal Might, which is red and a green, instant. Target creature gets +4/+2 and gains trample. Now, this card slaps. I mean, this is
That card
maybe
is
one of the best
so
combat
good.
tricks ever.
Yeah, that's definitely up there in terms of cards that I see go around because no one's familiar with it. I'm like, this is so much damage, like you don't understand. You win the combat and also deal them an extra like 3 damage usually.
Yeah.
It's much closer to Searing Blaze than people realize.
What do you think of this pack? What are you feeling?
All right, so first, I'm just gonna gush about the cards I love in this pack.
I like a lot of
Uh,
cards in this pack.
I like a lot of the cards. Obviously, I put them in my queue. Okay, Reeve Soul. This is a card is so unassuming that I only learned about because I started designing cubes and just always fits the box of exactly what I want my cheap removal spell to do. I was looking for sorcery speed removal, and it cares about power and toughness, but doesn't invalidate the larger creatures. So it's efficient in terms of killing 3 drops and can trade evenly with 2 drops. So this card is so perfect for me in terms of where I think it fits into like a removal landscape, which I makes me love it so much. Even though as a card, it's fine. It's not exceptional. It's not bad, but it's fine. It
I
is.
played a
It
lot of
is.
Origins Limited, and so this I have nostalgia for this card.
Yeah. Other cards I really like. Awaken the Ancient. I wanted to put in a single card in each color that says, hey, if you're playing mono or mostly, here's your reward. And this is the version for red, which is this gets a lot better if you have 5 mountains in play. And so you can like actually you can still trap the triple red and then put it on an untapped land. You still have an untapped mountain to attack with, getting in with 7. But you can play it if you only have 3 mountains in play and make essentially a tap 7/7, and that's fine. It's still big.
This pack
We've
has a
talked.
sick combo in it where you play into the Maw of Hell, you blow up the mountain that Awaken the Ancient is on, and then you deal 13 damage to your Rushing Tide Zubera and draw 3 cards. Now,
Synergy. There you
we're
go.
gaming here.
You've unlocked the secret. Yeah. And Colossal Might, which we both talked about as loving that card. I never played original Alara. It was before my time. But in one of the Guilds of Ravnica, I don't remember whether it was Guilds or Ravnica Allegiance, there was the card Collision Colossus, which was a split card that half of the card was Colossal Might. And that was where I learned to play against it. And I was like, oh, this is a lot.
Yeah.
I will also give a dishonorable mention to Twisted Landscape. So I love the landscapes. I think they're really cool. They're actually getting cut from the cube
Oh,
for a very interesting reason, which was so I talked about how I had my friend Charlotte, who was newer, over and talking about cards. And at some point, I was like, hey, should I put in just basic fetches and shocks as a nod to if you play other cubes where there are fetches and shocks, you can use this as a way to learn the gameplay. And there's other reasons why fetches and shocks have sort of interesting gameplay. And the response I got was, no, I hate shuffling. And I feel that. That was a while ago, and time passed, and these landscapes come out. I played a little bit of this limited, not a ton of Modern Horizons 3, but I looked at them, I'm like, oh, these are really slick for in terms of gameplay. So I put them in, and then as I was walking around at Saltbox and I saw them in all the decks, I had an immediate flashback to Charlotte saying, I hate shuffling. I was like, oh, I learned a lesson here, and then I forgot this lesson.
yeah, because there
So
aren't
they're
many
gonna
other cards in the cube that shuffle.
no, not really. Shuffling kind of sucks.
I agree. It adds time to the round, especially with a lower power cube like this. You want
Yeah.
to, you don't want to slow the games down as much as you can.
Plus, like the cycling helps a lot here in terms of informing the drafter about what colors the land is, but it's potentially not as intuitive that you should be taking this ostensibly Jund card if you're just playing black red.
Yep.
Just that it fetches 2 colors is good. It fetches green too, like that doesn't matter. You don't need to put a forest in your deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting down to the actual card you would take from this, there are a lot of reasonable cards to take. I think Essence Scatter is extremely efficient in something like this. But man, I at the current moment I'm at right now, I just want to take Colossal Might.
I'm going a totally different direction here. I'm addicted to value. I'm just
Hmm.
staring at that Gravedigger. That
Yep.
card is so good. You play it, you get back your Spire Patrol, and then your Spire Patrol taps another one of their creatures. Oh, Esper or
That's so
Cooking.
good. Yeah.
How do you lose when you're doing this?
And you Gravedigger trades off with another thing,
I
and
get
you're
back
like,
my
bam.
Rushing Tide Zubera and draw 3 more cards. Oh my gosh, it's unbeatable.
I think Gravedigger is a very reasonable pick here.
Yeah. Well, everyone let us know in the comments what you'd take. And Max, it's been awesome having you on the show. Anything you want to say before we wrap up here?
Come to Baltimore. Essentially, just yeah, if you come down on a random Tuesday night, we'll be playing at No Land Beyond. You can come out, we'll be hanging out. You can meet all of your favorite people, and me too.
Yes, including you, of course. Favorites.
Yes, obviously.
I wanted to
I
go to
always,
Saltbox. It just filled up so fast. It felt like by the
I
time I
I
heard
was
about it, it was
very
full.
surprised by that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was kind of disappointing, honestly. I was like, I wish it hadn't filled up so fast because there were a number of people who sent me messages saying they wish it had gone, but it'll be back. There'll be an announcement at some point when it gets created in several months.
Yeah. And are you going to any other Cube events this year? Where can people see you?
If they want to find me, the next Cube event I will be at is Cube for a Cause, I think.
Oh, yeah, I'll
I,
be there too. I just bought my
yeah.
ticket.
Oh, me too. Outside of that, you can come find me in Baltimore. In theory, you could message me on Discord if you want, but I'd rather you just come talk to me at an event.
Are you going to CubeCon?
I haven't decided yet. Not sure. It's a lot to get out there.
Yep, same. But I love CubeCon. It's a great event.
It's nice. I will say, having gone to these events, my favorite part is that you grow as a group and you get this whole socializing experience in addition to playing this fun magic.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow. And Max, thanks again for coming on. It was great having you.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.